Hi everyone, welcome to this short video on our paper, A Health System Assessment Approach to Analysis of Political Parties' Health Proposals, Portugal, which was published in the Bulletin of the World Health Organization in November 2024. We know that each paper has a story, and this is the one for this particular paper. It actually didn't start as a paper, it started off as a challenge. All the authors and also Eduardo Costa and Judith Gonçalves, we're all in the board of the Portuguese Health Economics Association. And in 2024, early on, a general election was called for. And so that was scheduled for March 2024. And we decided to try and inform the political debate. To do so, we organized an event on the left-hand side, as you can see. We organized an event that aimed to have three parts. The first in which we would present the political parties' health policy proposals. Then there was a debate amongst the members of the political parties. And then we had a commentary by three health economists. One of them is covered by my video. I apologize, Julian. So what we did, the challenge that we were faced with was how do we actually combine the information that is contained in a lot of pages of political manifestos that each of the parties has. All of them, or maybe some of them differently, but there is always a part on health, but it's really challenging to isolate their proposals and provide a coherent vision for what is their vision and outlook for health policy in the upcoming years. And so what we tried to do was to take a step back and actually use an established framework to do it. So we took the Health System Performance Assessment for Universal Health Coverage Framework from the WHO, the World Health Organization, and we decided to go through the political manifestos and collect all of the measures that we could identify in the political parties' manifestos. By measures, what I mean is we will do this and that, not a promise or something that sounds like a goal or an objective. So we screened the manifestos for something that was like actionable. And we did it for all the parties. And then what we found was 350 measures, a huge set of measures, 350 of them across all the 8 political parties. We identified based on those measures, we were able to identify the main themes that the parties were talking about. We were also able to identify consensus points. Maybe all of them were saying the same thing about the main themes, and we did identify at least one of them, the unified electronic record, and then also the points of divergence. So the things that the political parties will likely disagree on, and that will be like the points of contentious debate, and probably part of the discussion in Parliament in the upcoming session. So we were also able to do an analysis both within party and across parties by looking at their measures. So we could see by looking at the health system functions, which I'll describe in a second, we could tell, okay, this party gives more importance to this or that, and whether all the parties give more importance to one aspect of the health system. So this is the setup. Now we're going to look into what we actually found. So just to give you a sense of the framework, I'm not going to go into detail now, but the framework basically characterizes what the health system has to do into 4 types of functions, 4 functions. Governance, which is all of the regulatory framework, all of basically the ecosystem in which the health system lives. Then we have resource generation, so either physical capital or human resources. Financing, so how does the money flow in the system? And service delivery, so how does healthcare actually get delivered to the people? So these are the 4 functions. If you want to know more about this, it's in the WHO website. There is a lot of information about this. we had to do pretty much of a deep dive into how each of the function works and the sub-functions and all of that, because the measures, we had to understand both the functions and the political parties' measures very well so that we can map them onto each other. So overall, this is what we found in terms of the number of proposals by party and by health system function. The 350 measures were not equally distributed across all parties, but so there was variation between like the 24 measures of the Communist Party all the way up to the 68 measures of the Animals and Nature Party. There was also a lot of variation in terms of what were the functions that each of the parties gave more importance to. And the next slide actually shows what we use to identify clusters of parties in terms of the relative importance that they give to each of the health system functions. And notice that it is true that in this part of the study, we're only looking at the number of measures. So it's like the relative importance that they give by number of measures. We'll look into the detail of the measures later on. So each of the political parties has like a different importance that they give, and this gives a different shape to their radar. We are able to see that, for example, the Communist Party and the Left Bloc have pretty similar radars, giving most importance to governance and resource generation. Then we have other parties that give more importance to service delivery, other parties that give more importance to financing. The spectrum is fully covered, though. What we did next was to actually analyze the context and the content of each of the measures. I'm showing you here an example of selected representative sample of service delivery measures. So just to remind you, service delivery is really about how the health system delivers care to individuals, both public health or primary care, secondary care, all types of care delivery. The left-hand side, the main themes were identified by us. The text of the measures comes from the political parties themselves. A little bit of editing for the English, but those are the measures. And then on the right-hand side, we identified a party for each of the measures. So, for example, we identified a set of measures about the care provision for a target population, also some for emergency care, public health, mental health care. Interestingly enough, this measure in emergency care to strengthen gatekeeping for direct access to hospital emergency departments was actually implemented by the ruling party, which is not the one that proposed it, and has led to a lot of controversy in the health system. I find that particularly interesting. We did not expect that to happen. It's interesting to see how we can actually map those measures back to the political manifestos in this shape and form. Service delivery is a huge challenge for the health system, and it shows in all the controversy and all the debates. But the truth is, there is actually a lot of alignment in terms of the priorities of the parties in many of these aspects, especially in terms of service delivery, as we identified here. Finally, just to give you a quick summary of the lessons learned in this whole process. So this paper was published as lessons from the field article from the WHO Bulletin, and these are the lessons that we identified. This health systems assessment framework can be used to synthesize and analyze political manifestos, which enables systematic comparisons of parties' health policy vision and positions, including the identification of clusters of agreement or discordance between parties. I could not go into a lot of detail on all the agreement and discordance between parties here. It's really important, and it really comes across. If you read the paper, it comes across, but also we're happy to discuss it further if you'd like. The second lesson is this: expert knowledge of party rhetoric and political institutional context are necessary to inform the classification process. The classification process is how we go from what's in the political manifesto to the measures that we include in the analysis. So we take the text directly, but the interpretation of it really requires expert knowledge. We cannot, like, there there is a lot of institutional knowledge that is necessary to be able to classify, to know whether this measure, for example, is about governance and how the system should be built and what's the ecosystem that this measure should operate on, versus a measure that could be classified, the same measure potentially could be classified as financing because it's about how the flow of money flows through, how money flows through the system. Um, you need to know what each of the parties is actually talking about so that you can classify the measure either as governance or as financing. So that is a real heads up from us. And then finally, the health systems assessment framework can reveal missing elements in the health policy debate. We also need the expert review and rounds of review and cross-checking to make sure that what we're identifying as missing is actually missing. It's also missing from this presentation, but hopefully you'll be interested enough to go and read the paper and see what we found. Thank you very much, and this is it from us.